My wife and I were high school sweethearts. We were married shortly after she graduated from the police academy. I became an electrician. Our marriage was wonderful at first. I loved my wife's ability to operate as a respectable cop and honorable wife at home. She never let her ego go to her head, and she still allowed me to be the leader in our relationship. Over the next 10 years of marriage, we had one son. By this time, my wife was very comfortable in her role as a cop. She joined social media, updating her followers on a daily basis about her assignments and days spent monitoring civilians. When she was younger, she never wore makeup and hardly took the time to do her hair. One morning, I noticed the change in her routine. After eating breakfast and drinking coffee with me, she'd spend an hour and a half getting ready, which included her hair and makeup. I heard her phone pinging several times. We'd been married for more than a decade at this point, so I didn't feel right asking her for her phone. Instead, right before she walked out the door, I asked her who was messaging her while she got ready. She was really surprised I even asked. She said it was her sister. That was odd because her sister hadn't spoken to her in years, due to some petty disagreement she couldn't let go. So I expressed my surprise and asked if they had made up now. She reluctantly told me they had, and everything was all good. Well, that was hard to believe, but I didn't see why my wife would lie to me. Still, I considered finding her sister on social media to ask her if this was the case. I got busy at work when I got a phone call from the local police department. This was bad. I instantly believed my wife had been injured on the line of duty. I answered it, my heart already racing. They told me my wife had been arrested. This was really bad, just not in the way I thought at first. I went to the police station, where I was told the story and showed video surveillance. They played the video first, because it was easier than trying to tell me what they saw. My wife pulled her cruiser into the parking lot of our son's elementary school. She got out and watched the children play from a distance. They were probably too far away for her to spot our son in particular. Then, a second car pulls up. A man gets out, and my wife rushes into his arms. It's as if they are meeting for the first time, or the first time in a while. They almost immediately start making out, and I can't believe what I'm seeing. They don't care that they're in public, let alone the parking lot of a school, with children playing a short distance away. AP is grabbing her butt before they stop, and she drags him by the hand into the back seat of her cruiser, leaving one door wide open, probably so they wouldn't be trapped in the back seat. Once the car got rocking, the back door shut. They were locked in the back seat of the cruiser. Fast forward just over an hour later, when additional police show up and open the back door for them to get out. I couldn't be sure, but this had to be the worst moment in my wife's entire life. This was the worst moment of my life. Finding out that she had cheated on me so shamelessly at an elementary school while acting as an officer of the law. All of my respect and adoration for my wife dissipated. I felt alone, lost, and foolish. I wanted to hold my son, which made me wonder how long my wife would be in jail. The officers didn't know. All they knew so far was that she was being charged with public lewdness, indecent exposure, and disorderly conduct. Her life would never be the same. I got to see her hours later, and I didn't have to say a word. She broke down, telling me how sorry she was. She said she'd started messaging AP online, and today was the day they decided to meet in person. She said she never thought it was going to escalate the way it did, but I told her to shut up and stop making excuses. She started an affair that she decided to consummate seconds after meeting the man. This was not the behavior of a respectable, knowledgeable police officer, wife, and mother. This was the behavior of a sleazy girl that didn't know any better. I told her how disappointed I was that our marriage was over, and that's when I started crying. All the time and feelings I had for her were wasted. The marriage I wanted to last a lifetime was over, suddenly. I would become a single father. When I left the room, my wife was only a shell of the woman she was. I filed for divorce while she served time in prison. I gained full custody of our son. After my ex was released from prison, she started visitation with him. I could tell that after doing time, she was only thankful. She was so relieved to be free and able to see her son. She deeply apologized to me again for cheating, but I told her it was in the past now. I also found a woman worthy of a serious relationship. Believe me, I was skeptical, but her actions and the way she lived her life showed me that she wasn't the kind to underestimate the purity and sanctity of marriage. Her husband had passed away unexpectedly, which was why she was single. She hadn't slept with anyone after him. We waited until our wedding night to love each other in that way. My ex, on the other hand, was too thirsty for this traditional behavior. 4 months after being released from prison, she became pregnant. I was shocked, because she used to be so responsible and on birth control. Of course, this man didn't want to be a father and hardly knew her, but they are still trying to co-parent while my ex continued dating. She claims to be searching for a husband, but she continues advertising herself online and sleeping with men she likes. It's no wonder why they don't see her as wife material. Here's a humorous update that just reassures me I was right to handle things the way I did. My ex then tried to seduce me one of the times I was picking up her son, even though I was married. OP, your wife had her dream life, a loving husband, a respectable career, and a child. It's hard to believe she went so far as to start talking to another man behind your back while playing house and pretending everything was fine. Then she actually thought it was a good idea to meet AP at a school while she was on duty. As if that isn't bad enough, she decides to make out with him and have sex in public in the back seat of a car that can and did lock them inside. How embarrassing and shameful. And I'll still bet that women on social media would flock to support her and say she was within her rights to do what she did. People are loony, willing to defend anything. It seems like this was the start of the downfall in her life, because decisions she made after her release weren't any better. Anyways, thank you for sharing this with us. Now let's move on to our next story for today. Then how much I would fall for her. She was so kind, sweet, and shy. She didn't have social media apps, and she was extremely book smart. She was pretty plump, but she looked really good. I wasn't in it for looks, though. I knew better than to fall for any basic woman. At dinner, we really hit it off. We had a lot in common, and she seemed down to earth. I asked her out on a second date, and the rest is history. Eventually, she started hanging out with me in my dorm, and it was only a matter of time before she met my roommate. She was only shy around him, staying close to me whenever he was there. We would occasionally go out with a group of friends to have some fun, and the longer we spent together, the more she opened up to the friends we socialized with. She started to find her circle and connect with other women. That's when she joined a social app and added virtual friends. Around the same time, she started working out. At this point, we'd been in a serious relationship for 3 years, and we graduated. We got married around the same time my wife reached her goal weight. Her confidence and number of friends had tripled since the day she met me. I loved her with all my heart, and I was ready to be with her and only her for the rest of my life. She said she felt the same. After work one day, I made plans to meet my brother at a bar. I was under the impression that my wife was at home. As soon as I walked in the place, I spotted my wife. She was sitting at a table with my roommate from college. I hadn't spoken to him since before we graduated. I didn't even look for my brother, I just walked straight over to them. When my wife looked at me, her expression turned to humiliation. But within a moment, it changed to calm and defensive, like she already had a plan to explain all this away. I was right, because as soon as I asked what the heck was going on, she said they were just 2 friends out for a drink to catch up. My roommate could hardly look at me. He was trying to copy her calm expression, but he wasn't very good at it. I asked him to explain this, and he just shrugged and tried to play it off, like she asked him to meet up with her as old friends. I wasn't buying it. I asked how often they messaged each other, and she was quick to tell me that it had been at least a year since they spoke. AP looked guilty and tried to play dumb while he agreed with her. This just didn't feel right. Then my wife tried to say I was jealous and insecure, because she would never do anything to betray the sanctity of our marriage. My brother approached the table and asked if everything was okay. I told him it wasn't, and I'd have to meet up with him another day because I needed to take my wife home. She was beside herself, extremely upset and irritated with me and the whole situation, but she still grabbed her purse and apologized to AP before getting up and leaving with me. At home we had a big fight, because she really believed I was at fault for not wanting her to meet up with AP without telling me. I asked her to give me her phone, and that's when things went bad. She started packing a bag dramatically, like my request was the last straw. Just before it was filled, she broke down crying without a word from me. She asked me why we had to do this, and I told her it was because she wouldn't see things my way. My way being that, hanging out with my old roommate behind my back and refusing to show me her phone was unacceptable. She finished packing, making sure her phone was in her back pocket, before telling me she was going to stay at her aunt's house. I told her if she left, it would most likely be the end of our marriage, because I didn't believe she was really going there. She was just appalled, but still refused to give me her phone, and so she felt like she had no choice but to leave. 20 minutes later, I drove to her aunt's house, and she was not there. Her aunt had no idea what I was talking about or where my wife would be. I sat in the car on my phone and looked up my old roommate. I messaged one of our mutual friends from college and asked if he knew where AP moved to. I explained some of the situation, and that was enough for him to give me his address. My wife's car was parked outside when I got there. I was about to knock on the front door, but I heard noises from the backyard. The house was surrounded by dense woods. It felt like my heart was about to explode when I saw them having sex. There was an in-ground hot tub right beside them, so I ran up at full speed and shoved AP into it. I thought about grabbing my wife and dragging her back to the car, but I had a moment of clarity. She chose to come here and cheat on me, instead of giving me her phone and admitting what had been going on. This was more than enough of a reason never to speak to her again. I decided I'd done enough, and found out what I needed to know. She was absolutely shocked and hysterical. She wasn't really crying tears, but she tried to sound like she was upset or crying. She asked me what the heck I was doing, as if all this was my fault. I could not believe it. Then, as I started walking back to my car, she screamed for me to stop and come talk to her. She actually wanted me to talk to her about how I'd just caught her cheating on me. I spotted her keys laying on a chair and quickly took her house key. I left her there, screaming my name. I filed for divorce and refused to speak a word to her. The best part of this whole story is that she tried to continually sleep over AP's house, but after a few days he kicked her out and said he didn't see their relationship going anywhere. It started while she was married, so it's foolish to believe that that could become anything serious or worthy of trust. Since he didn't want her anymore, she went to her aunt's for real this time. Her aunt was furious with her, reprimanding her like she was a child, in person and on social media. It was only 11 months later that my ex announced she was expecting her first child. She was not in a serious relationship and still isn't. It's been 5 years since our divorce was final and I have remarried. My wife doesn't even have a smartphone because she doesn't want to be sucked into this warped perception of reality that modern women have today. They don't know a good match when they meet one, and they are always willing to trade up as soon as they get bored. My wife knows this and refuses to do that to me. She wants to live a life comparable to her grandmother, and I admire her for that. It's never acceptable for a wife to secretly meet up with another man. Even if she tells him she's going to, I think it would be best for the man to put his foot down and tell her no. What reason does a wife have to hang out or meet up with another man or men? It doesn't matter if it's a group of people, there's no reason why her husband can't be there with her. In marriage, they are one. She should never be talking to another man outside of her marriage unless he's related to her. Friendships, sometimes even between the same sex, often lead to complications in relationships. Either the woman falls for the friend of her husband or her female friend supports her in her delusional thinking. As soon as a woman gets bored in her marriage or starts to convince herself that her husband isn't meeting her expectations, there's always a woman there to tell her she's right, and she doesn't need to compromise or try to salvage the relationship. It's clear that your wife never had the confidence she found in her relationship with you. She took it and used it to start talking to your old buddy from college the moment she got bored. It's very sad that women have no idea how to commit to their man or their decisions nowadays, and are encouraged to let their emotions rule them. The best relationships and decisions are made by choice, not constant gratification. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. I met my realtor wife when she gave me the tour of my future home. It's a beautiful, unique mansion. I'm an architect, but the design of my house still amazes me as much as it did the first time I saw it. It's older, but you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at it. It's futuristic and stands out on a giant hill all by itself. At the time, my future wife looked just as dazzling as the house. I asked her out that very night and took her to the nicest place in the city. On the way, we saw a billboard with her face on it. She was the star realtor of Memphis Area Realty, and she made it her personal goal to live with me in the house on the hill. As an architect, I got to travel all over the US to share my ideas and designs with upper-class, business-driven people. I was never gone for more than 3 days. A lot of my work could be done remotely, but traveling was inevitable sometimes. So, our story really begins when my wife volunteered to watch her aunt's house for 7 days. I had to leave for a trip before this, so we were apart for 10 days. It was the longest we ever went without seeing each other. Before she got to her aunt's house, she texted me often and called each evening to talk and say goodnight. On the first day she spent there, she was pretty quiet. She finally sent me a selfie with a campfire in the background and another man. There was also a teenager I didn't recognize. I asked who they were, and she texted me to explain that they lived on the same property as her aunt, just about 300 yards away in a different house. They knew her aunt, but not enough for her aunt to have them watch her house. My wife told me the man in the picture had a wife, but she went to bed early. I believed her and just asked her to be careful. I told her I didn't want anyone in her aunt's house with her for safety's sake. She agreed with me. The next 2 days she spoke to me less, even though she knew I was back home by myself. She said it was because she was busy taking care of her aunt's chickens. The next 3 days she only called me for about an hour on each day. The rest of the time she said she had a few properties to show that were close to her aunt's house. She showed me some of her aunt's chickens, but video calling just made me wish I was there with her. Her aunt lived 2.5 hours from us, and I had to meet with a few clients in the opposite direction. On the 8th day she only texted me goodnight and told me she got sucked into a book all day as an excuse for not speaking to me. On the 9th night she sent me a selfie of her in bed. I honestly wondered if the man next door was laying beside her just out of sight. On the 10th night she video called me around 9. She looked sad and sounded unsure of everything. It was extremely different compared to how my wife normally acted. Her excuse was that she fell off the porch steps and landed face first in the dirt. I was about to sympathize with her, but she quickly and loudly said she'd be home tomorrow and hung up. I tried calling her back over and over, but she didn't answer. I was so mad that I didn't try to call her the next day, even though I was worried and wanted to know if she was near home. When she walked in I was relieved and swooped in for a hug. She was stiff and hesitant to let me caress her. I immediately asked her what was going on and what happened, but she played dumb and said there was nothing to report. I asked if she was as relieved to see me as I was to see her, and she only weakly said yes. We had sex, but it was just wrong. Before I could quiz her more, her aunt called my phone. It was odd that she wouldn't contact my wife directly, so I said it was someone from work and left the room to answer it. She said she came home to find AP with my wife in her home. She didn't know AP well at all, even though he was her neighbor, so it was very unusual to find him there without her permission. They looked spooked when she walked in, so she decided to review her driveway camera footage. I held my breath as she told me AP went to her house several times to see my wife. She couldn't see what they did in her house, but whenever they went outside, the audio was recorded. My wife trash talked me to AP and said he was better company. I asked her if AP was married, and she said no, so my wife lied from day 2. Her aunt told me that on the last 2 nights she stayed there, AP came over around 10 p.m. and didn't leave the house until the next morning. I felt like my world was ending. I remembered the picture she sent me, and knew for certain that AP was in the house at that time. She apologized and said she never thought my wife was capable of cheating or lying like this. My wife came into the room and asked me what was going on. I lost it. I started screaming what her aunt just told me, and she started sweating. She said whatever AP told her wasn't true, but I told her that cameras don't lie. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out, and I demanded to know why. I was so mad, I was shaking. She was holding her phone for some reason, so I grabbed it and snapped it in half. She screamed at me for that and called me a spaz, which made me lose it even more. I reminded her that I was freaking out because I just found out she spent nights with another man behind my back. I asked if they had sex, and she just told me I wouldn't want to know. I told her to get out of my house. It was then that her eyes bugged out of her head. It was like she didn't realize I was going to break up with her for this. She suddenly pleaded with me, saying she didn't mean anything by it and just wanted someone to hang out with while she was there. I was only more infuriated and told her she could have invited me over. If she was that lonely, she didn't have to cheat on me. I could have driven the distance if it meant saving our marriage. She stammered and couldn't think of anything that would help excuse her from this poor decision and life-changing mistake. I told her once again to get out of my house. I wouldn't forgive this level of blatant betrayal. Without her phone, she walked to a gas station in tears to call her mom. She came to pick her up and get her stuff, but my soon-to-be ex refused to tell her what was going on. So, I told her all about my wife's mistake. She begged me not to tell her mother, but I told her I was going to tell anyone and everyone what she did to me. Once she was at her mom's, I connected with my closest friends for support. In a short while, I became known as the city's newest and most desirable bachelor. She became known as the realtor that cheated on her respectable husband. Her billboard was graffitied and she was subsequently fired from Memphis Area Realty. OP, I can't believe your wife didn't respect you enough to let AP remain a stranger. She didn't have to interact with him at all, but she chose to and even lied about him being married. It was like she planned to do this by giving a lie so early into the trip. I am relieved that her aunt told you what she found out because it didn't seem like your wife had any intention of spilling the beans, even though it was obvious that her behavior changed and something was wrong. Just be grateful you didn't spend even more time with this woman. Karma took away the image she worked so hard to create. Since cheating on you, she's basically starting back from square one in life. I wish you the best and thank you for sharing this story. I'm sure you'll have no trouble at all continuing on your path to success and happiness. Now let's get into our second story for today. 12 years ago, I married my wife. She had her nursing degree and always seemed like an extremely kind and respectable woman. I was proud to go around bragging that I was married to the best woman in town. Since my parents were legends in the area, I felt almost like a celebrity. Success was easy for me since my father trained me in his craftsmanship. My wife and I often went to gatherings and parties, all dressed up and classy. I thought she deserved it, but I was wrong. I didn't know that 7 years after we were married, she met someone that would change our life forever. Shortly after we were married, she left the chaotic and unpredictable hospital employment to work a much more comfortable and sophisticated job. 2 elderly and wealthy people my father knew were looking for a trusted nurse to share their mansion with them for 1 week at a time, 2 weeks in a month. Although it was a small adjustment for us to live apart like this, I was extremely busy working on client projects, so the schedule suited us just fine. This happened, as I just told you, for the next 10 years. But in actuality, she stopped working this job completely after 5 years. One night, I was sitting at the dining room table with my wife of 12 years eating dinner. Earlier in the day, she helped me mark down which expenses she put her paycheck towards that week. I was feeling extremely grateful, happy, and pleased. I'm sure she was too, but maybe a part of that was because she was able to keep her affair from me for so many years. Suddenly, my phone rang. I excused myself to take the call like I always did if it was business related. In the other room, I heard my father's worried voice. He asked me if I knew that my wife wasn't working for his elderly friends anymore. I said she still was, so he explained that he was having tea with them when they mentioned that she quit working for them 4 years ago. The room spun, and I felt my body become weightless. I just asked my dad where my wife was getting money from. He didn't know the answer to that, and he was worried for me. In a daze, I turned to look into the dining room at my wife. She was chewing, but smiled a close-lipped smile at me. When my face didn't turn from extremely disturbed, she swallowed hard and asked me what was going on. I asked her where she'd been getting her money from all these years. Her fork dropped, and she slowly rose to her feet. She looked down, then back at me, and said she knew this day would come. She told me she loved us both, so whatever needed to happen was fine. She made peace with it. I just asked who she loved, and she said me and another man's name I didn't know. She met AP at one of the social gatherings we went to. He was a truck driver who was only home for 2 weeks out of the month. After their relationship evolved over text, phone calls, and several dates I knew nothing about, he asked her to move in with him. Somehow he didn't know she was married to me. She quit her job and was there for him whenever he got home from driving. He didn't notice her using his money to pay our household bills, because he made and spent money without much thought. I was speechless. She added that she would just make up stories about the old people whenever I asked. A scream came out of my body. I felt like I was shapeshifting into an animal. Every part of me hurt, and no matter what thought I had, it tormented me. I told her to get out, repeatedly. I was saying more than that, but I can't remember exactly what I said because my memory becomes a blur. She packed willingly and quickly, but she had the nerve to wish I wouldn't take it so hard. I was freaking out, completely devastated. I grabbed a paper bag and started breathing into it just so I wouldn't pass out. This was our entire life. I thought she was my diamond, something to be proud of, something strong and beautiful that I'd never lose. All the while, my father was on the phone. Hearing my despair, he called some of my friends, and they all agreed to meet at my house. When they got there, I literally fell into their arms, letting each of them hold me for several seconds. I needed their strength. My soon-to-be ex loaded her car alone, silently, until she drove away. I couldn't believe she was going so easily. My father, friends, and I all started talking about what to do next. I decided with their support that we needed to figure out who AP was, and tell him she was living this double life. She certainly didn't deserve to have a backup home and spouse she could run to. We found him, after some investigating. My wife's secret online account that led us to him was under her middle and maiden name. We messaged him, but he and I ended up speaking directly over the phone, so I could answer all his questions. When he realized I knew everything about his girlfriend, and had pictures of us living our lives together, he broke down. She broke 2 hearts. He swore he wouldn't allow her to have anything of his ever again. That same day, my wife called me sobbing. She asked me why I had to ruin her life. I couldn't believe her selfishness and inability to accept her wrongdoing. She got away with having 2 lovers for so long, I guess it was twice as heartbreaking to lose both at once. I told her she was the one that ruined our lives, and she was a liar that didn't deserve to be happy. That was the last time I ever spoke to her, even though she continuously tried contacting me. She updated me continuously. At first she tried getting back her old job, but after the couple found out she lied and cheated, they called her untrustworthy. She resorted to a nursing job at the hospital again, and rented a small, pathetic apartment. She was forced to work full-time as a nurse just to make ends meet, which she said was nearly impossible after mooching off 2 men for so long. With the new, demanding schedule, she hasn't had time to date anyone, and has asked me more than once to take her for old time's sake. I always ignore her. She already stole too much of my time. OP, I can't believe your wife cheated on you for so long. The fact that she was capable of lying and living a double life like that makes her an extremely difficult person to trust. Even if she changed her ways, she'd have a hard time getting anyone to trust her if they knew her history. Which means she'll probably lie and avoid telling anyone what she's done. This was not your fault. No matter who her husband was, she most likely would have done the same thing. Since her schedule was the same as his, she saw the opportunity to be dishonest. I am relieved that your father discovered the truth and helped you, along with friends, to get through the devastating news. You have a second chance at true love. This isn't the end, but just the beginning. You already know what it takes to have a successful, long-lasting relationship on your part. Just keep your faith and refuse to give up in finding an honorable spouse. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey folks, it's Gary here. Welcome back to the channel. In today's story, OP found out his wife cheated on him after he came home and noticed what happened to be a shadow hiding behind his bed. At that moment, he knew it was his wife's affair partner. Then even crazier news developed that OP's wife got pregnant by the affair partner. Now her life will be a complete wreck after OP reached out to his lawyer and is planning on annulling their marriage, meaning she will get absolutely nothing from him. In today's second story, OP found out his girlfriend cheated on him because she claims her family didn't approve of him. Now let's get into today's stories. I met my wife 4 years ago and got blindsided by her blatant and unapologetic infidelity. Just like every relationship, we had highs and lows, but I never imagined that the lows were that low. We got married 2 years ago and things were blissful. We both worked in the same work industry, but at separate companies. I was a manager and she was just coming up, and it would not be acceptable to work together as per company rules. Because we worked at separate companies and were nearly an hour away, I never believed cheating would occur because things had been so good at home. I could be working for 12 hours and come home to dinner, sex, and all the things anyone would love to come home to after a long day. Not to say I didn't do the same, because I always did. One of the things I loved to do was to bring her her favorite flowers every week on my ride home. She gushed every time I came through the door with them, and more so when they opened up to display their full color. Nearly a year into the relationship, we began to argue, but it was nothing more than simple misunderstandings. Although I was concerned, I also attributed it to some of our money issues. She hadn't been making as much, and although I was the primary breadwinner, what I made didn't always afford us the luxuries we had loved to engage in months prior. I always told her things would get better, and they certainly did. I got a raise, and so did she. However, the arguments didn't subside the way I had imagined they would. Fast forward to March 2020, and the pandemic put us both on our backs financially. I qualified for assistance and promptly took it to make sure we'd have the essentials. She, however, did not qualify and was understandably upset about it, and when some other companies outside of our industry were hiring, she went for it and got a job. I, at the time, was collecting close to what I was making pre-pandemic weekly, and we discussed it would not be advisable to go and look for a job that would essentially put me backward career-wise. This meant I would stay home and help out while she worked, and with both incomes we'd be just fine. Prior to her getting the job and during, I supported her by making sure she had her paperwork filled out. I got up early and helped her get her lunch. I sometimes showed up to her job to take her out to lunch and took care of most of the other duties around the house she wouldn't always have time for. Little did I know that her sudden happiness had nothing to do with just finding a job and getting back to a much more stable financial status. From what trickled truth she gave me, the affair started almost as soon as she got the job in May and continued until I went back to work in August, leaving the home unattended. In November, I became aware of the affair when I came home one day to grab something I forgot and found the door chained when I got home. When she finally came to the door, I found a bath drawn with candles lit and her wrapped in a towel. The chained door was very unusual and sent me into high suspicion because we lived in a secured building that needed a key fob or a code to enter. I began to look around and noticed a shadow behind the bed showing on a nearby mirror. I yelled out for him to stand up and face me, and for the first time I realized the guy that was cheating with my wife was someone I had met when I picked her up from work so many times. My wife formally introduced me to him, and at that very moment I felt sick to my stomach. He promptly left and I just sat there feeling stupid. I asked why, and her response was to get angry at me for finding out, and when pressed further told me she felt a connection. From there I knew I needed to get out, and mistakenly never had an exit strategy. Due to COVID, my funds were severely depleted and moving out was not an option yet, so I had to brave it for the next 2 months before I would be able to move. It was by far the most numbing time frame I have ever dealt with. We slept in separate parts of the home and carried on like roommates. I wanted to be civil not for her but for my own peace of mind. That, however, was not to be, as I found out she had become pregnant as a result of the cheating, and I only tore the wound back open, and I really began to feel like things couldn't get any worse. She also continued to flaunt the relationship in front of me and made going to work agonizing, knowing what was likely going on when I was not home. What's even worse is when I moved out she refused to pay the rent and I kept getting notices about it from the management company. In January I moved out and started to save money for a lawyer and sought therapy. I should note that she never believed I'd file, and I made sure not to let on that I would. It bought me plenty of time to consult a lawyer who went over all the details and originally wanted me to file for divorce but later decided that an annulment would be better. The lawyer also drafted letters to ensure I would not be on the hook for the lease and paperwork with the IRS to have our tax debts split. We filed at the end of May 1 year after when I believe the affair began. Since then it's come to light that she may have been involved with more than one affair partner, and when I say more than one, I mean 3+ suspected. As of 1 week ago, we had her served at work, because it had also come to my attention that she had moved out of the apartment and surrendered the keys. I got an email from the management company. Now I wait, as she has 35 days to respond before it goes into default and the decree is issued. I will update later as more news comes to light. Thanks for reading. Update. So it's been just over 3 months since my soon-to-be ex had been served back at the end of June. Her lack of response to being served only let me know she either didn't care or wanted it to be over just as I had. As I sit here typing, I was informed that she retained counsel and intends to fight the annulment. I was pretty shocked to find out after calling the courthouse that she had filed for this extension at some point at the end of August, which would have been nearly 4 weeks after the deadline given. My mind is in a whirlwind because I can't believe for a second that she actually wants to reconcile with me. At this point, because of the fact that she did give birth to the affair partner's child at the end of July, she may be looking for someone to raise her affair baby and not for a genuine connection with me. I really don't know for sure because I don't read minds, but the feeling that she may try to sue me for paternity enters my mind, and I won't lie and say I'm not worried about it. After months of therapy, I come to understand more than before how mentally abusive my marriage was, and I have no doubt that if she is the same person, she's tried almost anything to try and hold me hostage. The day she and her counsel speak with the judge is this Friday, and words of encouragement and advice would be greatly appreciated on how to deal with this news. Wow, OP, here are my thoughts on the situation. If you have evidence and it will not cause problems with the divorce or no-man proceeding, then get it out there, because she will lie. Also contact her HR with the evidence when it's safe to do so. You might even be able to get evidence from the coworker if you let him know you're going to name him when you go to HR. Let him know that it'll be proven that he is the child's father, but if he helps you can leave him out of it, or if he helps you enough you can drop going to HR entirely. Yeah, it's dishonest and underhanded, but you owe this guy nothing. Get what you want and nuke the remains. There are 2 things you know for certain. 1, he will sell out your wife, and 2, this will end their affair and any other office affairs, and let her family know that you are one of at least 4 other men that could be the father of her child. I wish you the best, OP, and hope your situation is able to work out. Now let's get into today's second story. First time poster here, so bear with me. I met my dream girl during the pandemic in 2020 by complete chance. It couldn't have gone better. We chatted all the time and got on perfectly and spent a few beautiful weeks together. I couldn't have asked for more. For me, it was the first person I had been involved with for a good few years. More on this later. So I became quickly invested in her, and she did with me too. During this time we grew very close and started to have deeper conversations. I found out she actually had a boyfriend when we started talking, but she quickly ended that as things had fizzled out between them. I should have taken this as a sign. Anyway, by the end of a few weeks I returned to the university to finish off my degree, and so did she. However, we were both well over 6 hours from each other. We agreed to stay in regular communication and would talk every day in order to see how we would go. We spoke every minute of every day as much as we could, growing closer and closer despite the distance. I made the journey down one time and we had the most lovely weekend. It couldn't have been better. However, I have a quirk or 2 in my past that I feel I should inform someone of if I ever get close. Better to be honest and upfront and all that. I have a one-time incident criminal record on a night out that I'm not proud of and got myself into a hole about. I did some major soul searching at that time and realized my life was on a downward spiral and I needed to sort it out. Long story short, I went from being at a dead end to studying online, gaining access to the university, and am now halfway through my master's, so I've made some progress. Anyway, that's a story for another day. Basically said the girl's parents did not like that I had a past like that, even though I was about to graduate and progress on to the next level. After that, things started to become a bit distant. We still spoke each day, and she convinced me she was going to talk to her parents about it when she flew back to Canada for Christmas. Yes, she's Canadian. If only I had known this was a load of rubbish. I eventually called things off in January 2021, as chasing a girl for that long really starts to ruin your mental health. In my own words, at the time, I'm 1% of the guy I used to be when we first met. So we went our separate ways. Fast forward to April 2021. I get a message from her asking me how I'm doing and that she missed me, etc. Me being the soppy guy I am, obviously went along with it. She had actually moved back to Canada in January that year to finish her master's degree. So at this point she was still there. We chatted through all of the summer, did video calls every day and texted each day saying all sorts of lovely things to each other. She was reeling me back in very well and suggested multiple times she was moving back to the UK for me and her to start a relationship properly. Obviously this had me hooked. I thought things were going to start looking up. I was very excited. Things were strange sometimes over the course of the summer, but I put it down to her being a bit stressed as her family was giving her grief for moving back to the UK and she had a lot on her plate with it. I feel so stupid for ignoring my gut about the whole thing. She got back here in July and from that month till November it was absolutely perfect. We were great together and it worked so well, but then Discovery Day happened on November 6, 2021. I had forgotten my laptop to do schoolwork, so she let me use hers while she was at work. I saw some things that looked funky to say the least. Emails with her ex's name, pictures from old holidays and folders with pictures on the laptop just on the screen plain to see. I did some digging and found some restaurant reservations from the first time we were talking. Then some emails regarding academic journals. They were both on the same course and living in the same city. I asked her about it and she said they were on placement together and that was it. Then I pressed more and more. She said they went to dinner a couple of times. Then I pressed more. She went to his house over a couple of months to watch sports with him and his friends. Then I pressed some more and she said he was walking her home from placement and she was inviting him inside. She slept with him on multiple occasions while talking to me. All of this info came out over a month and a bit. More information came too. She said she stayed at a cottage with her sister and mom when she was back home for a weekend. She saw him again with her family 2 weeks before she saw me again, had sex with him in the back of his car, and in her words said to make sure she didn't still have feelings for him before she saw me again. Honestly, since that day my head hasn't been right. I've been trying to struggle my way through it because she is convinced she made a terrible mistake because she knows I would be the best thing for her in every way. She basically feeds me all this stuff. Her reason for doing it? She didn't have approval from her family about me and thought I was too good for her and she has low self-esteem, so she tends to self-destruct. She wants to reconcile and is apparently madly in love with me and is now in severe depression because of what she has done to me. Her friend says she's never seen her like this over a guy before. Her parents and sister loved me when they met me, so they're very disappointed in her that she's done this to me. They didn't know in what capacity we were talking. She hid it. Everyone is hugely disgusted by what she's done and how she's played me for over a year. What do I do about this? I honestly don't think I could ever trust her again, not properly. If I could, it'd take years of hard work and we don't live super close to each other at the moment. Half of me feels like I should consider trying to reconcile because maybe she did just make stupid choices. I don't believe anything is really ever a mistake though, and perhaps under all of that exterior there's a good person. The other half of me feels like I should just cut my losses, chalk it up on the scoreboard as experience and move on. I'm at a pivotal time in my life doing the best I've ever done academically and personally. I'm well on my way to graduating from my master's with a potential PhD on the cards. I never once pictured myself doing anything like this. The only thing making me think twice is that I do want a family, wife and kids and all that, eventually. I just don't know if I'd be missing out on an opportunity to help someone be better and maybe do well from it myself. OP, after reading your story, here are my thoughts on the situation. So she cheated on you numerous times while you were long distance, then lied about it, trickle-truthed, gaslit you about the reason, and now you're long distance again and are wondering what the future holds? She is going to cheat again. She likes the option of having you around but isn't loyal, honest or respectful of your commitment. That's not a good choice for a partner in a same-city relationship. I'm not sure why you would waste your time with this. Stop with the long-distance nonsense. Just ghost her. No explanation needed. You don't owe her anything. Every second you invest in her is a complete waste of your time. Focus on your education. You will have plenty of time to find another woman that will be loyal and treat you right. Good luck, OP. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's stories. If there's a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Hey folks, welcome back to my channel Relationship Haven. Before the video starts, please make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If there is a story you would like to share with me, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Now, let's get into today's stories. Right now, it feels like my whole world is collapsing around me. I never thought I would find myself in this situation, but here I am. I, 42 male, have been dating my girlfriend, 40 female, for about a year and a half. In that time, we've had some rocky moments, but we've always managed to talk them out and come out stronger. Communication was always key, and I was led to believe that things were fine. Prior to the whole pandemic, we had made plans to finally move in together, and I was just waiting for my next paycheck to come so I could finally put a deposit down on a place where the two of us could make a new home. This past Saturday, I went to visit her to make sure she was doing okay. She recently lost her job, and to make sure that she was stocked up on groceries for the next few weeks because I didn't know when we would see each other again. Well, I didn't expect the day to turn out the way it did. Early in the afternoon, she ended up having a medical emergency. It was an incredibly scary and traumatic moment. I called the police, and they immediately came out, and we were en route to the hospital. In the whirlwind, I managed to grab her phone, thinking that I could call her parents to let them know what was going on. I got to the hospital and was told I would have to wait until she was stabilized. Alone in the waiting area, I opened her phone and searched for her parents' number. That's when I saw it. Text messages, pictures, and videos between her and her male friend. I don't know why, but I kept scrolling. A picture of a pregnancy test. Explicit pictures. Things I never would have imagined. They made exchanges referring to me, asking if I had left. I went back and looked at the other messages, dozens of them to dozens of different men. My heart sank. I was gutted. I am a decent enough person that I managed to stay at the hospital so I could see her. I went into the ER room where she was being held and saw her there, asleep on the hospital bed, unaware of all that I knew. Eventually, I looked at her and just broke down. I was so angry, hurt, and upset. It was bad enough that we were at the hospital, but this was a double punch to the gut. They admitted her overnight. Because of the pandemic, no visitors were allowed upstairs, so I had to leave. That was the last time I saw her. The next day, I called her on the phone. I told her everything. I said I knew about her and her friend. I said I knew about the others. I demanded answers. I got none. That was 5 days ago, and all week I have been walking around like a shell of the person I once was. I feel hurt and alone. I feel emasculated and betrayed. I have been talking with friends. I've been exercising. I've been doing everything I can to take my mind off of this. I actually felt a little better this afternoon, enough so that I actually could eat something. And then I got the text. Miss you. I love you. And now I'm back to where I started. I didn't reply. I don't know where to go from here. I just needed to write this down somewhere and get it out, because it just hurts so goddamn bad. How could someone who I had planned on spending the rest of my life with do these things? I keep looking back for signs, but I don't see any. Man, she got me good. I guess if there is any silver lining to this, it is that I found out about this now instead of after we moved in together. I just want the pain to stop. Update. Just wanted to give some quick updates to clarify what has happened since I posted this in the wee morning hours. First off, she is blocked on all social media and from my phone. However, I'm expecting to hear from her through other channels, because this morning I also contacted AP's wife with all of the screenshots, information, and timelines that I had. No response yet, but I can certify that it was delivered. Hopefully I hear back. Thank you to everyone for your support and all the kind words. I have known from day one that this wasn't my fault. It wasn't the result of anything I had done and that this is her problem. I am not going to analyze the relationship as much as I want to, because frankly, I cannot trust anything she ever said or did at this point. There is no chance of me falling for reconciliation, because I'm firmly in the once a cheater, always a cheater camp. The proof is just too concrete. Also, I recently had an STI test and it was clear. It's been over a month since she and I were last physical. She said she was going through some medical issues, but now I can see that is all BS. Thank God for this community. I will keep you updated as I hear more from the AP's wife. Update 2. I have to say a huge thank you to every single person who has commented. The outpouring of support and confirmation that I'm doing the right thing has helped me a lot today. I'm so glad I decided to share. It's definitely helped me feel a little better today. I know the days, weeks, and months ahead will be hard, but I'm ready. I'm still dealing with a lot of emotions, but what is it they say? Time heals all wounds. I think that's a fair assessment. I just want to appreciate all the advice, support, and love you've shown me today. I have not heard back from AP's wife at all. I contacted her through Facebook Messenger, and it looks as if the message has been seen. I also texted her, left a voicemail, and sent an email to the only email address of hers that I could find. I don't know if AP is in freakout mode and trying to lock her down, but I'm not going to give up hope. She needs to know what her husband was up to. I haven't had any additional blowback, and my ex has not tried to reach out to me or anyone I know. At this point, I'm on my way to recovery. OP, don't waste any more of your life on her. Try to push her away from your mind over the coming weeks. Some people are terrible, and you'd never know it because they're so good at pretending to be something they're not. Try to do things you enjoy, try to move on, and know you didn't deserve to be treated like that. Don't be nice. Be free. Cut ties with her, have a funeral for her in your mind, and never speak to her again. She doesn't love you, she's just too afraid of rejection to show herself as the shallow, lying, attention-seeking animal she is. Now, let's get into today's second story. We started dating in September 2018 on my birthday, so that day has always been extra special to me. My partner does roster work. She works 8 days on a mine site and is back 6 days off. I work a decent 9-to-5 job, so we are both pretty well off. She's also an international resident, so I decided to help her get her visa to stay. We applied for the de facto/spouse visa at the end of 2020. For the first 3.5 years, our relationship was really good. We both loved each other and were doing so much together. Unfortunately, some clashes between her and my mom led to us moving out and renting a place for 6 months. She knew how to do everything. She's extremely independent, so she knew how to take care of a house and cooked really good food. I, on the other hand, was a bit of a drockic and didn't know how to do any of that properly. My mom looked after me a bit too much, which handicapped me a lot when I moved out. Whilst I was working every day and being very smart with our money, we never had any money problems. I was also a bit selfish as a 23-year-old who tended to spend a bit too much time at the computer and away from household chores. I did make sure I spent some time with her though. We watched some good shows like Game of Thrones, Money Heist, and Merlin. I did, however, clean enough to ensure we got 100% of our bond money back. I did all the de-weeding by hand. After our 6-month lease was finally up, we bought a place together. This was around September 2021. She started her mining job around December 2021. And I, still being a drockic, didn't do much of the housework. Although I did learn to cook some dishes as I needed to make sure I kept myself fed whilst she was on site. But I still didn't do the laundry or vacuum and mop the floor because my standard of cleanliness was so much different from hers. Instead, I spent my time learning how to invest because she told me she wanted to make a lot of money. I designed an investment plan just to suit her. I enjoyed investing a lot. Cleaning, not so much. Come April 2022, and she broke down in her bedroom at my lack of help around the house. She told me she was incredibly stressed with having me come back and do all the housework after 8 long days on the mine site. At that stage, I finally woke up and became the adult I should have become long ago. I started vacuuming and mopping the whole house once a fortnight and doing the laundry every week, making sure she had an empty basket to work with when she came back. It was like a switch was flicked on in my head. I should also mention that sex was non-existent in the last year of our relationship. She didn't want to take the pill due to side effects, although she was on it periodically for the first 3 years, and we had sex then. I went to buy a pack of condoms, but then she went and hid the condoms when we were about to have sex, so I just refused to have sex with her because I didn't want to have unprotected sex and risk pregnancy. She even suggested that I take the male version of the pill that would make my sperm infertile or something. I don't even know what she was on about there. I kept up my routine, making my own lunches and maintaining the house while she was away. I finally became an adult that could survive on my own, but the relationship didn't seem to improve. Slowly over time, she stopped cooking for me and didn't like me touching her in bed. She also gave me her cheek for kisses instead of her lips. Looking back, these were all red flags, but I was blinded by love and my desperation to save the relationship. I kept up with the cleaning and maintenance. She even went back on the pill to balance her hormones, or so she claimed. I tried initiating sex with her again at that point, but she refused, and then came September 17, 2022. I was mopping the floor in my computer room and couldn't use it because the floor was wet. I went to use her laptop instead and saw everything in Messenger. She had been in a casual but intimate relationship with a man on the Mine site, a little younger than me. The text messages were extremely explicit. I saw they had this going on since late July. I couldn't go any further back because I was about to throw up. I confronted her about it that night and she told me she had been extremely stressed with work and had fallen out of love. I didn't understand. She loved me when I was a total dropkick, then all of a sudden I became this mature and capable adult, but she didn't love me anymore. I was a total wreck for the next week and couldn't sleep well. I decided to call things off with her. I cannot be with someone who commits infidelity. We are going to split up our assets and go our separate ways. She told me she wants to remain friends, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, nor do I think that's a good idea for either of us. This also has implications for her visa. She is currently on her temporary visa until the end of November this year, at which point we were supposed to sign off on some documents so she could get her permanent residency. I told her I refused to sign any documentation as I basically would have to lie, which could get me sent to jail along with a big fine. She may still be able to get her permanent residency if the department decides to award it to her, but she is at a much greater risk of having to go back to a student visa, which means she will lose her mining job. Along with her life savings of having to enroll in some course she doesn't want to complete and pay international student fees, which are bloody expensive. Along with wasting years of her life just to progress her spouse visa, all for nothing. Despite the harm she has inflicted on me, I hope she gets her permanent residency. It doesn't affect me either way whether she gets it or not, but at this stage I have no influence over it because I have already withdrawn as her sponsor. I cried multiple times in front of multiple people. I cried because the vision I had of us being together with our many successes around us is now impossible. I cried because I was forced to make decisions that would either harm myself while benefiting her or harm her while benefiting myself. I cried as I entered the empty and dark house after work was done, knowing that she was living with her friends and I was alone. I will be moving back to my parents in a few months. It makes no economic sense to stay out here on my own without a partner. This was an exit affair. By the time she began crying to you about your lack of effort, she had already checked out. She, unfortunately, chose the most immature way to do it. At least you can use this as your own learning experience and personal growth. You didn't deserve to be cheated on. She could have been honest at any time. It would be best if you get to no contact as quickly as possible. Be sad about her visa situation, but don't legally risk yourself. She knew the situation and its implications. That's on her. Her actions have consequences and she is finally feeling them. You need to look out for yourself first and foremost. And absolutely don't be her friend. You can't be friends with someone who traumatizes you in such a despicable way. Don't kick yourself too much. You were 20 years old when you entered into this relationship. You showed a great deal of maturity when you changed your behavior to help your partner and the relationship. Regardless, you have dodged a bullet and you will be better off without her. A young man who is capable of living on his own and who can cook and clean is a huge plus in the dating field. Enjoy being single. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's story. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I'm a man, so I think I'm not that special. Therefore, I just do the work regardless of how I feel, and to make matters worse, I swallow my emotions. However, I think my case is genuinely special, so I want you guys to listen and let me know what you think. Your help will be highly appreciated. Here's my story. They say that time heals everything. Plus, they say you just need a new woman to move on. I'm now engaged and back home with my fiancé, but my anger toward my ex will just not go away that easily. I'm 39 years old already and was 18 when I met my ex, Marisol. During that time, I was a member of a Latin Kings band. I had been in that gang for 5 years, and always found myself in and out of trouble. Thankfully, Marisol helped me change for the good. She was a church girl, so she was the complete opposite of what I was. We were like night and day. Somehow I thought we would complement each other. You'll understand why I was wrong, but anyway, let me explain to you how I met her. My grandma, a pious and devoted Catholic, dragged me to Sunday Mass, and when I saw Marisol, I fell in love right off the bat. I asked my cousin, who was a friend of hers, if he could introduce me to her, but he refused. He said that he didn't want me to ruin her. He was right, but she got my head in the clouds. Have you ever met someone that you wanted to make yourself better to be with? Wanted to be that man who would walk the right path? That was her. When I found out that she was going to church almost every day, I hung out by the steps, talking to her. I always walked her to and from church. She made me feel like I wasn't worthless. I forgot my love for Jesus Christ, but she was like a faith reminder to me. I felt like the Holy Spirit was invading me. On top of that, I finally gave up on gang life, got my GED, and became a regular churchgoer. One thing led to another, and we ended up dating. I couldn't stop thinking of our promising future together, away from the dangers of the gang lifestyle. However, I got unintentionally pulled back in. I was at a store and ran into someone that I used to have problems with. They were running their mouths, and I tried to ignore it. I swear I did. I just let them talk and I walked away, but then I got stabbed in the shoulder blade and lost my mind. I beat that man. I just couldn't accept this violence, plus I'd probably die if I didn't fight back. Anyway, I got arrested, and suddenly, it was like the things I did to make my life better vanished. Marisol was mad at me. My grandmother kept bringing up my past mistakes, and my cousin was telling me that he knew that I wasn't going to change. Those tribulations were just a God's test, I guess, but it hurt me to hear those words of unappreciation and distrust. My public defender saw me trying to better myself, and by the grace of God Almighty, got me off after a month in lockup. Despite being angry with me, Marisol visited me almost daily. I really appreciated her understanding, and for me, she was the light at the end of the tunnel. I endured that unjust imprisonment just to be with her again. A month after I got out, I found out I was going to be a father, and I didn't want my kid to have a dad that was dead or in jail. God blessed me with a son and another huge test that would tell if was a man of value or not. Only when you're forced to improve, you improve, and feeding a family and providing for your woman is a huge example of that. I didn't want to be an absent father or get killed. I did not want Marisol to become a single mom. I wanted to do good deeds, not only to seek God's pleasure, but also to thank Marisol for helping me get back to my faith and escape my former lifestyle. I saw this situation as a blessing, but I just didn't know that I would get tested even more after 9 months. I then went to a trade school to become a mechanic, and I hustled for my future family. When Luna was born, it was almost the worst day of my life. Marisol wouldn't stop bleeding. She went into shock, and they had to give her a double hysterectomy. She was in the hospital for months, and Luna became my world. I wanted her life to be the best. I wanted to give her the world. When Marisol was released, I promised her that our daughter will have a life far better than ours, and for years I kept that promise. I saved enough money to move us to the suburbs and became homeowners. I made sure Luna went to private school, knew how to defend herself, and always made sure I was the perfect husband. I didn't know my parents. Plus, I didn't have a positive male role model in my life, so I didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like. Television dads were my male role models, and I mimicked them and the marriage they had on television. As the years went by, I owned my own garage. My cousin became a pastor. My grandmother was still a pain in my neck. My relationship with my wife was stronger than ever, and I made sure I kept my prison body, but Luna hated me. Since she turned 13, she just started hating me. She didn't want me to hug her, rolled her eyes every time I told her I loved her, ignored me when I asked her about her day in school. It hurt me, and Marisol saw it. She told me that she was a teenager and that I should just let it ride. She will come back to me. For 2 years, it was like that. So for her quinceañera, I wanted to go all out, got everything she wanted, and she was still disrespectful. Briefly, the old me almost came out just to put her in her place, but instead, I went to my cousin, vented my frustration and doubts about being a good father, and he told me to just let her be, and he said a prayer for me. I wanted a slideshow for the father-daughter dance. I got a chunk of the pictures of us together, but I realized I didn't have any recent pictures of us. She didn't want to take any. The last time I had pictures of her and me smiling with me was on her 13th birthday, and those were on my daughter's broken tablet. I took that tablet, went to a repair shop, and I didn't care about the cost. I needed that tablet fixed, after a day and $300. The tech fixed it, and I was happy. I knew her passcode, but I never bothered invading her privacy. I just wanted those pictures, and when I opened that tablet and looked in the gallery, there they were, my little girl smiling and happy to be with me. I felt great. Then the instant messages appeared. It was my daughter talking to my wife. It was a long banter that she didn't want me to dance with her, and it did hurt, but as my wife said, she's being a teenager. Then she said something that destroyed me. She asked why she had to do the father-daughter dance with me, since I'm not her father. I felt my heart stop, got dizzy, my mouth dried up, and I needed to sit down. My wife responded that I raised her, I loved her, and that makes me her father. But Luna responded by saying that my cousin is her father, and she can't wait for her to turn 18, so she could tell me the truth, and she could live with her real dad. That she hated me, that she thanked God that I'm not her father. Marisol began cursing her out, saying that it was a mistake for my cousin to tell her the truth 2 years ago, and the more they talked, the angrier I got. My wife lied to me for 15 years. My cousin, whom I confide my issues about Luna, and my fears about being a bad father, not only slept with my wife, but had me raise his child. I wanted to hurt them. I felt a mixture of anger, sorrow, and grief. I wanted to scream, cry, and die at the same time, if that makes any sense. Not only did I believe that my wife was faithful, the very guy who was supporting me during my tough times, my cousin was the kid's. That's a double betrayal. But you know what? Revenge is a dish best served cold. It was about time to give these traitors a taste of their own medicine. I went to a dark place, so I wouldn't do anything stupid. I told Marisol that I needed to focus on work so I could pay for the quinceañera, and instead I drove to Manhattan, and saw my old public defender who wasn't a low-level attorney anymore. He had a nice expensive firm near Midtown East. I was surprised that he remembered me, but apparently I was his first case as a public defender. We sat down, and I told him everything. Gave him the tablet, and when he turned it on, the messages just kept coming. Only this time, Luna was talking to my cousin, her real father, and he was telling her to give me a chance. How I was always there for her, but Luna told him that so was he. How it makes sense that they have so much in common, and even called him Poppy multiple times in their conversation, and he responded and told her that she was his little girl. We went through our options, and he asked me what I wanted to do, and I told him that I wanted to go full scorched earth. I wanted to poison the well, and he asked me several times if that is what I wanted, and nodded. I also told him that everything had to be filed before the quinceañera in 2 weeks. So we sat down and spent the next 12 hours on what needed to be done, and I followed his instructions to the letter. I secretly placed my business for sale. I called the private school and told them that I will not be paying for next year. I closed the college accounts and the savings that I had for Luna, and prepared to place my house for sale online. There was only one thing I deviated from: the day of the quinceañera. That day went off without a hitch. The whole family was there. Luna was smiling and having fun. Marisol kept asking me if I was okay, and I lied to her. It was hard not to hate her. She knowingly let me raise another man's child. She slept with my cousin, a man who saw me as my brother, and the godfather of my child. So the rage was hard to suppress, to say the least. When it was time for the father-daughter dance, I called her to the center of the stage. She looked annoyed, but walked over. I had the music playing, and her smile tore me apart. For years, I wanted to see that smile again, and now I didn't want it. As we danced, I had the slideshow playing. Then there were pictures of the two of us, and towards the end of the song, screenshots of her text messages with her mother and real father. My wife, the cheater, learned the hard way why the Bible criminalizes adultery, and my cousin learned the hard way why you shouldn't put your hands on another man's woman. Both acts have severe consequences. Needless to say, this didn't bode too well. Marisol looked like she saw a ghost. Luna just kept staring at the large screen, and my cousin just stared at me with fear. Marisol ran to me and told me that she could explain, and I told her that I filed for a divorce. She could explain it in court. She grabbed my arm, begging me, and I pulled back. I told Luna that I worked a lot to give her the world, and now she doesn't deserve it. I began to walk out, but not before telling my cousin that every time I see him, I'm going to knock him out. Then I knocked him out. The aftermath was harsh. Marisol and Luna were at my grandmother's apartment. Her family was shocked and disgusted with her. They wanted nothing to do with her. Her father actually apologized to me. I don't know why. He never liked me despite turning my life around. That man hated me, but now I was the perfect husband and father, but just a few days prior, I was the devil incarnate. My grandmother had the audacity to tell me about the story of Abraham, and how when came back from battle 3 years later, his wife had a 1-year-old child, and he raised him as his own, and how I should be like Abraham, so I told her to get out of my house. All those religious people were the biggest sinners on the planet in my eyes. I admit my past sins, especially the years as a gang member, but at least I gave up on that lifestyle and became a good provider and husband. In contrast, these religious individuals were nothing but traitors. She wanted to go to therapy, but I just didn't feel like it. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Plus, she thought I was overreacting. To make matters worse, she acted like she was a telenovela actress, blowing up my phone after she learned that I sold my business and I put her house on sale. To this day, I don't know what hurts the most. Being lied to by a woman who you thought was the love of your life, or having a child whose life you tried to improve and give the world, just toss you aside like trash. Fortunately, I didn't need to pay any child support, and the female judge was absolutely fair. God bless her for her understanding. I'm a man well treated by the judicial system. That's a great accomplishment. Still, I'm not over what she did. OP, you escaped a toxic lifestyle and came back to your faith. That's admirable, and you're a great example of discipline. It's natural that you reacted badly when that gangster stabbed you in the shoulder, and you should not have been put in prison. However, all this proves is that Marisol wasn't the one for you since she cheated on you with your cousin and lied to you for 15 years. Once a cheater, always a cheater. And let's not forget your cousin. He's a traitor too. Now that you're not providing for your ex-wife and your cousin's kid, they're both contacting you and trying to make things up. Keep in mind that you've just made the right decision, and you shouldn't feel any regrets for ignoring those liars. Thank you for sharing this admirable story with us. I wish you all the best going forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.